نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. Surah Al-Haqqah. So, some introduction about Surah Al-Haqqah. It is Makki Surah, Surah number 69. There's 52 ayat and 2 rukus. The meaning of Haqqah is the inevitable reality. And the name comes from the beginning of the surah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala posed a question about it by saying, Al-Haqqah, Mal-Haqqah, wa ma adraka Mal-Haqqah. So we'll learn about that in a minute. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to recite the surah in Fajr prayer. Then what's the connection of the surah with the previous surah, Surah Al-Qalam? So in Surah Al-Qalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described the Day of Judgment. One example of there is Yawma Yukshifu an Saq, and that is the day when the dreadful calamity will unfold. And in this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides more details around the horrors of that day. Also in the previous surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala threatened those who rejected Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَذَرْنِي وَمَنْ يُكَذِّبُ بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ. And in Surah Al-Haqqah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes then the consequence of rejecting prophets and punishment of past nations. So exactly, if you reject the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then what happens and what has happened to past nations when they did so. At a very high level, the entire surah is dedicated to describe the horrors of resurrection, punishment of disbelievers, and reward of believers. So وَعَدًا لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ بِالْفَرْحَةِ وَوَعِيدًا لِلْمُكَذِّبِينَ بِالْحَسْرَةِ. So the believers, how they will be joyous on the Day of Judgment once they will be given the book of deeds, and then how the disbelievers will be yearning and crying on that day, trying to amend what they did, but they couldn't anymore because their time has passed. And another main topic of the surah is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is acquitting Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam from any fabrication of Allah's message, such that there is no possibility of him being a poet or a soothsayer as claimed by disbelievers, and he does not say anything of his own accord. It is a true message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's get into it. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Al-Haqqah, Mal-Haqqah, wa ma adraka Mal-Haqqah. The inevitable reality. What is the inevitable reality? And what will make you know what is the inevitable reality? So first, let's understand the meaning of Al-Haqqah. So one meaning is the inevitable reality, something that is bound to happen. And the other one is something that provides evidence that something else is true. And if you think about the Day of Judgment, you can apply both meanings to Day of Judgment. It is bound to happen. So the occurrence of Day of Judgment is certain. And also, it will be evident that day on the Day of Judgment who is guided and who is misguided. So what will happen is the Day of Judgment will prove when the deeds are reconciled who was really on the right path and who was actually astray. So the reality of paradise for believers and the reality of hell for disbelievers becomes evident. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses a few names for Day of Judgment in the surah. Al-Haqqah, Al-Qari'ah, shocking event, Al-Waqi'ah, happening, occurrence. And then, of course, in many other surahs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has used different words to refer to the Day of Judgment. You see a pattern here which comes in a few different places also in Quran. Like it comes in Surah Qari'ah, Al-Qari'ah, Mal-Qari'ah, wa ma adraka Mal-Qari'ah. Or in Surah Mudaththir, Sa'uslihi Saqar, wa ma adraka ma Saqar. Or in Surah Qadr, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr, wa ma adraka ma laylatul qadr. So this pattern is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first presents a phenomenon, then he asks. So what is that phenomenon? And then he makes you wonder, makes you understand that you cannot even fathom the gravity of that phenomenon or the true understanding of that phenomenon. So it is really to emphasize the severity and importance of a matter that is beyond our comprehension and that is beyond common understanding. So this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this approach to attract our attention and make us understand that what he's mentioning here is of no little value. It is actually of a huge importance that we have to pay attention to. كذبت ثمود وعاد بالقارعة. Thamud and Ad denied the calamity, resurrection. So who were Thamud and who were Ad? Thamud, they were the people of Prophet Salih alayhi salam, and they're known for making houses out of stones. They lived in between Hijaz and Sham. And Ad was another nation, and that was a nation of Prophet Hud alayhi salam, and they were famous for their power and strength, which made them really arrogant, and they used to claim that no one would be able to punish them, and hence they denied the hereafter altogether. And here comes another word, al-qari'ah, for the day of judgment, because on that day, there will be a rumbling sound that will cause terror in the hearts of people. This sound will destroy the heavens and the earth, including huge objects like mountains and stars. فَأَمَّا ثَمُودُ فَأُهْلِكُوا بِالطَّاغِيَةِ. So as for Thamud, they were destroyed by the overpowering blast. So at-taghiyah comes from tughyan, exceeding limit, and it's referring to a very high-pitched sound that would exceed the limit of any sound we are aware of this world. And it is going to exceed the limit of a sound that any human heart or brain could bear. So it is an unbearable, loud, high-pitched sound. So when Thamud exceeded the limit of disobedience, of denying the day of judgment, they were destroyed by a sound that exceeded the limits of their bearance. It was, as I said, a combination of high-pitched sound and lightning. So we will find in Quran again and again mention of the previous prophets and their stories. There are names of about 25 prophets mentioned in the Quran, including Dhul-Kifl. And inshallah, we'll be learning about their stories as we go through different surahs. But one thing we should be mindful of is what is the purpose of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning these surahs, these stories in Quran, stories of the past. So Quran is not a book of history. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's intention with Quran is not to give out details of every important event that happened in the history of humankind. That's not the purpose of Quran. Rather, Quran is a book of guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions people of past so we learn from their mistakes and not fall into the same trap as they did. So when we read about these nations in the Quran, we should not act like disbelievers. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the behavior of disbelievers in many places, as it comes in Surah Nahl. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُم مَاذَا أَنزَلَ رَبُّكُمْ قَالُوا أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. And when it is said to them, what has your Lord revealed? They say, legends of the former people. So to the disbelievers, these were just stories of the past. They did not take them anything beyond that and did not take any heed from these stories. On the other hand, what should be our behavior, our action when we look at and we hear about these stories? We should actually do a retrospect of our own behavior. We should reflect on them. And we should really think hard about, are we showing similar signs of rejecting the truth and committing sins, the boldness that these previous nations exhibited? Are we also becoming bold and being inconsiderate of the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And if we are, then we should not act surprised if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reprimands us and puts us through punishment as well. Because that is what He did. That is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is what He did with the previous nations. When they exceeded their limit of transgression, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down punishment upon them. Let's make a dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us guidance and the ability, the tawfiq, to reflect and understand the true meaning of Quran and to take heed from what is being said here about the previous nations. Allahumma ahdina li ahsani al-a'mali wa ahsani al-akhlaqi. O Allah, guide us to the best of deeds, the best of manners. Ameen. All right. So let's briefly recall the story of Salih alayhi salam. So he was sent to the nation of Thamud. And Thamud were idol worshippers. They rejected the message of Salih alayhi salam. And they had been given many blessings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them the power and skill to shape stones. They used to carve out houses from mountains. So when Salih alayhi salam repeatedly gave them the message, they got tired of it in the end. And they said, okay, we agree to believe in you on the condition that you will show us a miracle. So they demanded him to ask your Lord that He sends a she-camel out of the mountains, which must be 10 months pregnant. So Salih alayhi salam made the dua, and behold, a pregnant she-camel appeared. At that time, Salih alayhi salam said and warned his people about this miracle as it comes in Surah Hud. وَيَا قَوْمِ هَذِهِ نَاقَةَ اللَّهِ لَكُمْ آيَةٌ فَذَرُوهَا تَأْكُلْ فِي الْأَرْضِ لِلَّهِ وَلَا تَمَسُّوهَا بِسُوءٍ فَيَأْخُذَكُمْ عَذَابٌ قَرِيبٌ. And O my people, this she-camel of Allah is a sign to you. So leave her to graze in Allah's land and touch her not with evil, lest a near torment should seize you. So for a while, Thamud let the she-camel graze and drink freely, but in their hearts, they hated it. They began complaining that this huge she-camel drinks most of the water and frightens their cattle. So they plotted to kill the she-camel. And a person named Qudar bin Salih killed it in the end. Salih salam told them the punishment will come in 3 days, now that they have committed this sin of killing the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the she-camel. But they remain arrogant. And again, they repeated what has been mentioned many times, even about the kuffar of Makkah, saying, well, if you are truthful, just bring on the punishment. Why wait for 3 days? So 3 days later, thunderbolts filled the air, followed by severe earthquakes, which destroyed the entire tribe and its homeland. The land was violently shaken, destroying all creatures in it. And there was a horrific cry, which led to the death of all the disbelievers of Thamud. There's a very important lesson for us in this story. The she-camel was killed by one person, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent punishment to the entire nation because of their compliance to that act. The same can happen today. If we see evil but do not advise our family members and others in our circle of influence to refrain, we should also not feel secure from Allah's punishment. It comes in a narration by Abu Bakr Siddiq, anhu, in Muslim Ahmad. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, إِنَّ النَّاسَ إِذَا رَأَوْا ظَالِمًا فَلَمْ يَأْخُذُوا عَلَى يَدَيْهِ أَوْشَكَ أَنْ يَعُمَّهُمُ اللَّهُ بِعِقَابِهِ. If the people see an evildoer and do not stop him, soon Allah will send His punishment upon all of them. Another narration in Sunan Abi Dawood by Abu Sa'id Khudri, anhu, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, مَنْ رَأَى مُنْكَرًا فَاسْتَطَاعَ أَنْ يُغَيِّرَهُ بِيَدِهِ فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ وَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ بِلِسَانِهِ فَبِقَلْبِهِ وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. If anyone of you sees something objectionable, he should change it with his hand if he can change it with his hand. But if he cannot do so, he should do it with his tongue. And if he cannot do so with his tongue, he should do it in his heart, that being the weakest form of faith. It is unfortunate, my brothers, that for worldly matters, we never settle for a lower rank. We always try to achieve and exceed whatever our goal is. But when it comes to religion, we compromise on it very easily. And many times, do not even utter words of admonition in the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's open disobedience, let alone take any physical action. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the strength in our iman to do amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar and not punish us on our shortcomings. Moving on to the next ayah. وَأَمَّا عَادٌ فَأُهْلِكُوا بِرِيحٍ صَرْصَرٍ عَاتِيَةٍ. And as for Ad, they were destroyed by a screaming, violent wind. This word sarsarin means severely cold, and Atiya is severe blowing of the wind. And Qatada says it blew fiercely upon them until it pierced their hearts. سَخَّرَهَا عَلَيْهِمْ سَبْعَ لَيَالٍ وَثَمَانِيَةَ أَيَّامٍ حُسُومًا فَتَرَى الْقَوْمَ فِيهَا صَرْعَى كَأَنَّهُمْ أَعْجَازُ نَخْلٍ خَاوِيَةٍ, which he imposed upon them for 7 nights and 8 days in succession. So you would see the people therein fallen as if they were hollow trunks of palm trees. So such was the severity of punishment that it lasted 8 days and 7 nights. And according to some narrations, the punishment started on Wednesday morning and lasted till the following Wednesday evening. The word husuman is a plural of hasim, and hasam means izalatu athar shay. So punishment occurred to them until their existence was wiped out. So it was happening in succession, one after another. The punishments were coming to the point where they were completely wiped out. Another meaning of husuman is what we get from Surah Fussilat, fi ayyamin nahisat, in days of calamity. The word khawiya is something that is ruined or hollow, as mentioned here, the hollow trunks of palm trees. فَهَلْ تَرَى لَهُم مِّن بَاقِيَةٍ. Then do you see any remains of them? So you find none of the generation of their generation left in this world. There's not even a single person who now attributes himself to be of their lineage. They were completely wiped out. وَجَاءَ فِرْعَوْنُ وَمَنْ قَبْلَهُ وَالْمُؤْتَفِكَاتُ بِالْخَاطِئَةِ. And Pharaoh and those before him and the overturned cities came with sin. So mu'tafikat is something that's upside down. When cities were destroyed and they were toppled because of the punishment, they were completely turned upside down. And another meaning is about cities that are adjacent to one another. فَعَصَوْا رَسُولَ رَبِّهِمْ فَأَخَذَهُمْ أَخْذَةً رَابِيَةً. And they disobeyed the messenger of their Lord, so he seized them with a seizure exceeding in severity. إِنَّا لَمَّا طَغَى الْمَاءُ حَمَلْنَاكُمْ فِي الْجَارِيَةِ. Indeed, when the water overflowed, we carried you, that is your ancestors, in the sailing ship. This ayah is referring to the flood of Nuh alayhi salam, when he supplicated against his people as they were denying him and opposing him, and they continued to worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So his dua was answered, and the entire earth was covered with flood. Everyone was destroyed except those who were with Nuh alayhi salam on his ship. So as we look around today, all humans are considered to be descendants of Nuh alayhi salam. لِنَجْعَلَهَا لَكُمْ تَذْكِرَةً وَتَعِيَهَا أُذُنٌ وَاعِيَةٌ. That we might make it for you a reminder, and that a receptive ear would be conscious of it. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is explaining why He's describing all these stories, so that we pay attention, so we focus on it, we take heed from it. Let's quickly review what has been revealed over the ayats from 1 to 12. So we discussed the doctrine of resurrection and punishment, and then destruction of Ad and Thamud because they denied the Day of Judgment. Also, the fact that disobedience of a messenger leads to punishment in this world and definitely in the hereafter. And finally, protection of Nuh alayhi salam and his followers from the flood, while all the others were destroyed. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم